The Fantastic Four are widely regarded as Marvel's first ever family. They've had a wide range of comic book history spanning over 60 years, and the team features some of the most iconic comic book characters ever made. There's the one that stretches, there's the one that turns invisible, the one that can go on fire, and the one that's like a huge rock, I guess he is. I mean, they call him the Thing, so he's just something. At the end of the day, their origin story is very simplistic. Their characters are also fairly simple to understand. However, this does raise a question. If the comic books are so easy to follow and the characters aren't that complex, why has it been so hard to make a great live action adaptation? And by saying that, I'm implying the fact that they've tried. Obviously, there's a new Fantastic Four film coming out this week. Actually, by the time this comes out, it will be out. And before then, we've had 4 adaptations. All of them have seen mixed to awful reviews. So I've decided to go back in time and analyze and discuss and critique all of these movies, including the newest released one, and just break down to the point of why is this so hard to understand, and have they finally made one that's good?
Anyone for a ride in a rocket ship? I'll drive.
Now, starting off, we have the 1994 The Fantastic Four. If you are somewhat familiar with the characters and the history of this film, you kind of already know why this was such a clusterfuck. But just in case there's a small minority of people that don't understand what happened, basically, let me sum it up very quickly. In 1986, Constantine Film obtained the rights for the Fantastic Four for what has been estimated to be about $250,000 from Marvel. They wanted to make a movie, they wanted to make a bunch of different movies, but as time went on, they realized that the rights were actually going to expire and they would have to give them back to Marvel. So instead of doing that, they teamed up with B-movie specialist Roger Corman and made a movie on a budget of $1 million. However, the plot twist, the movie was never actually intended to be released. They hired relatively unknown actors, they had a very small crew, and the whole principal photography went on for maybe about a month at best. At the end of the day, some people were kind of wary of the fact that they might be making something really bad, and that's because no one really cared what they were making, or at least behind the scenes no one cared. They were doing the bare minimum to fulfill contracts so that they wouldn't have to give the rights back. Obviously, those rights eventually did go back, considering we've had 4 other movies since then. But honestly, my opinion is it's very scummy what they did to all these people who were so passionate about what they were doing, buying comic books to understand the characters and everything, and feel closer to the source material. The film itself, yeah, you can tell it's really cheap. It was never really officially released. There were some pirated versions that you can find out there online, which I personally watched for this video. Realistically, you're not getting any quality better than like 480p. Regardless of how many times that people restore it and try and upscale it, it's still going to look pretty bad. If you want to know more about the behind the scenes stuff, they actually did a documentary called Doomed, which I highly recommend. It's not like a super special documentary, but it goes across the basics that you kind of need to know for why this was such a disaster. Speaking about the actual movie, it's not great. There is some things that are kind of good about it though. The performances are fairly decent with what they've been given to work with, e.g. the bare minimum of what they were given. The costumes I really love. They feel so nuanced and grounded to what the source material describes the Fantastic Four as, in comparison to some later adaptations we'll talk about. The prosthetics for the Thing in this movie are probably the best they've ever looked. Like, he looks drawn straight out of that comic book, and they are kind of ahead of their time a little bit. I wouldn't be surprised if like most of that money went towards those. Regarding story, it's pretty basic. They go in, they get their powers, they have to defeat Doctor Doom, and then the movie kind of just ends. There's a whole section in the middle where they're just kind of in a lab. And in fact, most of the movie takes place in a lab. That's why this one is so stale. So, is this a good adaptation? No. Is it anyone's fault? Mostly the company for thinking they could pull it off on such a small budget. Honestly, if maybe they aimed in more of a campy direction, maybe it would have worked out better. But unfortunately, they tried to go as serious and deep as they could. And in the end, it's kind of where all this falls apart. Also, Batman gets a mention in this one.
A stronger man.
Thank God it didn't end there, because in 2005, we got Fantastic Four. That's right, like the same people from before, they did it again. Now this one is notorious for how kind of serious they take it, whilst also keeping this comedic value to the film. In some places it works very well, and in other places it just is the reason why it is not very good once again. And you may not believe this, but before Chris Evans was Captain America, he was in this movie playing Johnny Storm, and then obviously they brought him back for one of the worst movies I've ever seen. I mean, what is there to really say here? There's a handful of things that actually are a tiny bit enjoyable and build off of what was in the last one, as in they make these choices better this time around. But then there's also a wide array of things that just flat out are awful to watch. The things prosthetics are still good, the special effects are still pretty awful, specifically the Reed Richards stretching, which, to be completely honest, it just seems to be like the hardest thing in the fucking world to do. So I'm not gonna shit on that too much. Or maybe it isn't, I don't know. I'm not a VFX artist. Honestly, out of all the actors and actresses in this, the person you feel the worst for is Jessica Alba. Sue Storm is a very interesting character, and they find ways in this to just make her as boring as possible and just kind of a love interest. She can turn fucking invisible. I mean, there's even scenes that only exist to get her to strip down bare naked just to sell tickets and so that people can come in and go, oh, thank God there was a scene where she got naked. It's just kind of exploitative and disgusting and pointless, and not what the Fantastic Four is about. Or at least to me, it's not. In terms of story, it's the same as the 1994 one. They go up into space, they get into a big accident, they get their powers, and then they spend most of a movie in a fucking lab. What's the point? Take them out of the lab, make them do something interesting, anything, please! I would honestly say that this one and the 1994 one are on par with each other. I don't know who that insults more, the old one or this one. They're just kind of stale, they're not that entertaining, and honestly, I don't really want to talk about this one that much. We're about to move on to arguably the best of the three. Moving on to the sequel of the 2005 film, 2007's Fantastic Four: Rise of the Silver Surfer, and I look back and realise I didn't mention why exactly I thought first 2005 film failed, and that is because of a very simple thing. These two movies only existed to sell toys to children. I noticed, for example, because, yeah, I never saw these films in cinemas. When this one came out, I was 5. The one significant thing I do remember from this era was seeing these toys in Burger King and the Spider-Man 3 toys in Burger King. This one kind of takes the goofiness to the max, and for that reason, I actually like it a bit better than the last one. They finally work out the perfect dynamic between Johnny Storm and Ben Grimm. Mr. Fantastic is doing, I don't know, he's doing some bullshit. However, Jessica Alba's Sue Storm is still left with absolutely nothing to do. She quite literally is just reserved to a love interest in this. And of course, we can't forget the big introductions. Lawrence Fishburne as the Silver Surfer, or Doug Jones as the Silver Surfer, since all Lawrence Fishburne did was the voice. I also realised I haven't mentioned Julian McMahon, who actually, unfortunately, passed away a couple weeks ago. And I think his performance is very fun in these, but again, it's held back by the fact that these movies look awful. And how could we not forget Galactus? Jesus Christ. I always used to say when comic book fans get pissed off about films because they're not faithful to the comics or stuff like that, it's like, well, you have to let some of that stuff go so that it works as a movie adaptation. Not in this case though. They're completely fine for arguing against this one. They turned Galactus into a fucking cloud. You can tell that these are from the 2000s because they just have that corny, cheesy, ugly feel to them, where it's the music choices, the cinematography, the shitty effects, but nothing puts these more in a timeline than turning that Donnie into a fucking cloud. What was the point? I've been really angry about all 3 of these movies. I'll give you one benefit to them. They're all short. This one's only 92 minutes long. The other 2 are like barely over an hour and a half. So if there's one thing that I can admit that I like from these is how short they are. But at the end of the day, the Tim Story Fantastic Four films only existed to sell cheap toys to stupid children. So I'm recording this bit, basically, well, after I finished this video and I realized I didn't mention big old John Krasinski played Mr. Fantastic in Doctor Strange in the Multiverses of Madness. My thoughts on his performance? There's not much to it. He gets killed off in like 10 minutes. Spoilers, I guess. Elizabeth Olsen turns him into spaghetti.
Say that again?
It's that time now. I know a lot of people weren't looking forward to this, and trust me, you're not alone. Neither was I. It's time to talk about Fan 4 Stick. Now, first of all, there is a large array of behind-the-scenes stuff, which probably played a huge part in the fact that this movie is, and I'm not exaggerating when I say this, one of the worst films ever made, and I'm not going to direct any hate towards Miles Teller or Josh Trank, Kate Mara, Michael B. Jordan, Jimmy Bell. I'm not blaming any of them. This is a movie that sucks for a wide array of reasons, most likely determined by executive heads. You know, nothing new. I feel like that's a running theme between all 4 of these movies that I've just spoke about. The reason that there's so many issues with them is because these executives just had too many other things on their mind, which got in the way of, I don't know, making a movie that audiences would actually enjoy. And that's a huge issue of this. I couldn't believe my eyes when I saw that this is actually only 100 minutes long. Could have sworn it was longer. It feels longer. And at the same time, it feels so quick. Everything happens so fast. Once they get their powers, the film just rushes to an end, and it's just kind of absurd to see such a large company make such an awful, offensive piece of shit. And not offensive in the fact like, oh, this is really like out of touch. Well, it is out of touch, but I don't know. It's scrambling my brain just thinking about it. The story's bad. I can't believe it's 10 years old now. It feels so dated. And I can't believe in the big year of 2015, they were still doing the big blue laser in the sky. Like, it had already been a tired out fad that a lot of other really bad movies had done. Like, Jesus, just grow up. Honestly, I'm trying to think of like something to say to make me not sound like such a cynical dickhead, but it's just plain awful. The writing's bad, the editing's all convoluted and frustrating and confusing and all over the place. The performances aren't great. They try their best, but there's just scenes in here that are just awful. I mean, the ending, say that again. Fuck off. You know, maybe in another universe, there is a movie with these 4 actors, and they're actually giving great performances. I don't think they're miscast in any way. I think they actually could work well. Especially Michael B. Jordan's Johnny Storm. You have the correct component, you just can't do anything good with it. I will say, before moving on to the last movie we have to talk about, that there is one good thing that comes from this. Jamie Bell and Kate Mara actually got engaged, and now they're married and they have 2 children, and honestly, it's incredible that such an awful movie and an awful filmmaking experience can still find a tiny bit of light in it. And I know how corny that sounds, but I stand by it. The fact that they were able to fall in love with one another whilst making this, it shows truly that anything's possible.
What are you doing?
What do you mean, what am I doing?
I mean, you're gonna ruin your appetite.
I'm hungry.
And that takes us up to today. Marvel Studios finally have the rights back. You know, the mouse buys anything and everything at once. So, of course, eventually we were going to be met with a new Fantastic Four film. I can finally say the phrase that I've been itching to say since I started. 4th time's a charm.
Say that again?
I don't think this movie is groundbreaking. I don't think it's a masterpiece. I don't think it's the best thing since sliced bread, but I can say one thing confidently to all of you watching right now. It did what it had to do, and it made me finally care for these characters that I haven't cared about since I was reading these comics when I was younger. It just did what it had to do. It had to make these characters actually interesting and have them have a good story and have good performances. It had everything that I needed. However, there are issues. Starting off great though, the 4 members of the Fantastic Four are played fantastically.
Say that again?
Pedro, Eben, Joseph, and Vanessa are all, they are my Fantastic Four. They put in the work and they're great in this, and watching this you get the family vibe that the comics achieve so perfectly. Not only that, but they're all pulling their weight, they're all doing everything that they have to do for their performances, and they have great chemistry. There's nothing else to argue about it. I remember when this was being announced and everything, and there was all the awful fan casts online. This one's my favourite. We have the perfect family of 4. Another great thing is that the special effects are great for the Silver Surfer, for Galactus. They finally made him not a fucking cloud. Ralph Ineson is fantastic.
Say that again?
I can proudly say to you all, I know you're all itching to hear it, but they finally pulled off the stretching. They made Mr. Fantastic look cool and not weird and creepy and ugly. The music as well in this movie, you know, for Marvel movies you kind of go in and you expect the bare minimum. The music in this is pretty pleasant to listen to, and I can actually see myself listening to the score in my free time, which is an absurd statement to make for a Marvel movie these days. Hey, this is Future Kami here. I forgot to mention the fact that I loved all of the practical stuff, the fact that they built Hubie, and apparently the Galactus stuff, like they built like a Godzilla sort of set and had him smash through it. I don't know how true that is. I loved all the practical stuff. I think the movie is beautiful in the sense that all the 60s stuff is just fucking fantastic to look at.
Say that again?
If you have the slightest interest in any of this stuff, I would go and see it for all the production value because it's so perfect for once, which is something that's so rare to say about these films when they're all visual effects. The movie just looks stunning. Now time to talk about my large issue, which is, what we know as audience members is that 20 minutes of this film was cut out. Only a small selection of people in the world saw it at the advanced screens, you know, the test screenings. There's 20 minutes of this film that is gone. No John Malkovich, no extended scenes from Natasha Lyonne or Peter Wallerhouse's Mole Man. There's just stuff missing. And that's where a lot of the issues of this come from, in the sense that it feels like the film is missing a second act, which is crazy to think. You know, they almost hit the nail perfectly. They have this scene in space that is kind of interstellar-y, and it's just fantastic.
Say that again?
And then after that, the film just kind of loses its footing, which is hilarious considering the movie's called First Steps. Nevertheless, the ending stuff, the smashy, crashy stuff that everyone has grown tired of in these movies is okay. For me, after talking about how much I relentlessly hate these movies, maybe sometimes just okay, is completely fine. Fantastic Four First Steps gets a big thumbs up from me. I think they finally worked out the dynamic to the best of their ability, and honestly, I'm done arguing. I'm fine with this. Maybe the bare minimum is okay sometimes. Speaking of which, before I actually end this video, let me just talk about Doctor Doom. I didn't even talk about him in Fan 4 Stick, he's shit. Anyway, we're getting Robert Downey Jr. Doctor Doom. Some people think it's going to be a plot twist, some people think it's just going to be a setup for the actual Doom. I don't care. These movies have grown so ridiculously tiresome. The shock value of casting RDJ is just humiliating for the company, as is that little post-credits teaser that they had at the end of this. I couldn't care less. Just bring Galactus back or something. Who cares? I can't believe that's what they're ending to set up their universe with, or their big finale with. Like, you know, Thanos had so much build up and now it's this, but I'm getting off balance here. At the end of the day, no one really cares. There's people that will still see these films. I'll probably still see them. I've just watched 5 Fantastic Four movies. I'm fucking over it. Before going though, it would be fantastic if you subscribed and liked the video. It helps out a lot more than you would imagine, and I hope you enjoyed me ranting about these silly little comic book movies once again. I try and hold the superhero videos to once a year because the space for this style of commentary is so oversaturated on this platform. So thank you very much for humoring me today, and I'll see you in the next video.
Say that again?